Hello and welcome. It's another fabulous selection of wonderfully, terribly tales from the very sinful Radio 2 Drive Time listener. Welcome to another Confessions podcast from Radio 2. Everyone is seeking forgiveness from the Caring Collective. This week's concise collection includes irritating, idiotic invigilators, frisky, frolicking friar, hapless hotel hilarity, and a terrifying tube trip. Here it all comes. So it's 21 minutes to 6 o'clock, and as everyone knows, it's exam season. Loads of revision going on, lots of serious stress being passed around. And of course, mainly it falls on the students. But let's now spare a thought for the members of staff who have to invigilate at an exam, because that is a tough gig to have.
Tough? Really?
Yeah. So, extenuating circumstances. Here's a confession from Mickey. Father Simon, back in the summer of '93, I was a newly qualified teacher. When invigilating public GCSE and A-level exams, you are not allowed to read newspapers, you are not allowed to mark work, and you're not allowed to sleep. Really?
Okay.
That's a surprise. Yeah. You have to pace up and down the exam hall looking out for unlikely malpractice. Myself and 3 good friends had been pulled together for an hour's worth of invigilation. Their names cannot be divulged, as 2 are currently head teachers and responsible role models. 2 of their nicknames, though, were Spanners and Spoons. And also present was the new head of Latin, who was pretty, vivacious and game for anything. Well, almost. To pass the time, I suddenly had the idea of writing down little challenges to carry out that hopefully wouldn't disturb the hard-working pupils, but could provide some light relief and make the time pass just a little bit quicker for the poor invigilators. Spanners had to go and stand next to the pupil he felt most likely to end up a millionaire by the age of 25. This he did, and we duly and subtly nodded our agreement. He got that right. The head of Latin had to go and stand next to the pupil most likely to be an MP, and I had to choose the pupil who was most likely to end up in prison.
Okay.
Anyway, this was all very silly, but it helped pass the time. Actually, there was another one which I didn't mention.
I'll bet. Yeah.
And no. Past the day. We all had a good laugh about it in the pub later that evening. We agreed to do something similar the next week when we'd all been pulled together again. The following week, we almost rushed into the exam hall with excitement, which was the sports hall. I'd come up with some slightly more adventurous challenges for the invigilators, and luckily only about 20 students were in the hall, as it was a paper for the history of art. I feel I may already have Matt's forgiveness.
Yeah.
First, Spanners and Spoons had to race a slalom course between the desks down the length of the hall. Spoons won easily, being a competent sportsman and a skier as well. Next, the head of Latin had to follow the red curved line of the basketball D, even if it meant walking past pupils at an angle between their desks. She did this superbly, pretending to look over the pages of written answers some of the pupils were churning out, as if looking for cheats, and nodding and frowning occasionally. Time was going by nicely, and the exams officer popped in and was pleased to see us all walking about, unaware that we're in the middle of various challenges, and checking on the students. He smiled his thanks and slipped out. Finally, the head of Latin had to pretend that the baseline of the indoor tennis court at the back of the hall was actually a tightrope across Niagara Falls. She must now walk along it without falling off. You wouldn't think that an hour's worth of exam invigilation was going to be that tough or boring, really. But anyway, this is a lot more fun. By now, she was well into the spirit of these challenges and enjoying herself. Off came her shoes, and away she went, arms out to keep her balance.
What?
Well, she's going over Niagara. Spanners, Spoons and myself were at the front of the hall, near the students, watching intently. She was desperate not to come off the red baseline. Alas, she did, and she slipped, as her tights had reduced friction between her and the floor, and she landed with a heavy thump. Spanners had to leave the hall, pretending to have a sudden throat tickle, but we could hear him collapse with laughter outside. Some of the students turned their heads, shook them as a cynical teacher might do to a pupil who had just given a stupid answer to a stupid question, and carried on writing. Spoons, being a proper gentleman, quickly walked down to help get her up. She was giggling quietly, but otherwise she was okay. As Spoons helped her to stand up, the effort of getting up whilst giggling meant she had a rather short but loud rear-end malfunction, which I'm afraid to report clapped all around the sports hall. This is quite a distraction when you're working on your A-level art. Again, more pitying, head shaking from some of the students, and on they got with their work. I also feigned a sudden coughing fit and left the hall to join Spanners outside for several minutes to collapse with laughter. Every time Spanners and I tried to re-enter the hall, we'd just collapse in hysterics again and run out, leaving the other two to do just the last 10 minutes of invigilation by themselves. Some of the upper sixths sitting there history of art never spoke to me again, but there were no parental complaints, so we got away without a telling off. Today I'm a responsible head of department at a small private school in the southwest, and I can't believe how silly I was. Father Simon asked for forgiveness not for putting the head of Latin in an embarrassing position on the floor at the back of an exam room, but for disturbing the poor students, and I hope none of them underperformed and so missed out on a place at their desired universities. I am at the mercy of the collective. I don't think, with all the exams that I take, I don't think it ever occurred to me that the invigilators were doing anything other than invigilating. And clearly there's hours of fun to be had. I must tell you what the other games were that they stand by the pupil who, for example.
I think we can all guess.
I'm somewhat
Anyway,
impressed.
yes, go on.
I'm somewhat impressed by this because you're right. What can you do? You've got to keep your eye on all the pupils. You've got to be there for them if they need you. But you're right. What do you do for an hour? I have to say, I did find it hilarious. It was absolutely brilliant. But the head of Latin, I'm confused as why she got so much into the part, because it's meant to be in her head. It's meant to be in her imagination.
Well, slightly unusual.
She's not meant to take it that far, which means because she took it too far and because she disrupted those poor pupils doing their history of art exam and could have basically disrupted their thought processes and its exam. It's too important. You can't mess with them. So you're not forgiven.
It was the putting the arms out thing. Well, just walk along a line.
Unnecessary.
Anyway, Brother Matthew.
Well, yes, I somewhat go along with Bobby on this. Is that I am all for the invigilators doing these games and challenges when they're supposed to be invigilating, because obviously nothing's going on that they need to be concerned
there might
about.
be.
There might be. Yeah, there might have been a massive cheat fest
going
on. But, there wasn't. It was art history. So I am going to say, though, that if you are doing these challenges, you need to make it look like you're still doing the invigilating. That's the beauty of this, is that you're doing something else, but it looks like you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. So, because you decide to take off your shoes and then stretch your arms out as if you're on a tightrope, even though that is very, very funny, I'm not going to forgive.
And then fall over and then have a bottom malfunction.
Okay, yes, we got the malfunction.
Which would be distracting.
Yes, now if you're in the middle of your...
I'm trying to write about... Van Gogh.
There
Stop
you go.
it.
Let's all think of an artist. Yeah.
It was the first one that came.
Yeah,
Sorry.
well done.
How shallow. How shallow. I was trying to think of Caravaggio, but it wouldn't
Oh!
come. There you go. Here's tonight's confession, which comes from Paolo. Dear Father Simon and the Forgiving Few, I'd like to dedicate this to my friend Fran, not her real name, but I know she listens to your show and will make the connection. I want to thank her. She's taught me so much about myself over the last year, and she makes a difference in my life and is an incredible woman. Nicely done. My story begins 34 years ago in the spring of 1982. I was in my 20th year and a student in my final year at an agricultural college. In just a few weeks, the summer would arrive and I'd be taking up my new and humble life in a religious Franciscan community where I was to become a Franciscan friar taking holy orders. Think Friar Tuck, only with less weight and a mop of bright ginger hair. That's me. Well, the end of my usual freedom was in sight, and facing a life of poverty, chastity and obedience, I was keen to make the most of the time I had left before the gates closed, if you see what I mean. And so, being a sociable kind of guy, I prepared myself ready to go out this particular Saturday night along with my friend, who we'll call Pedro, to a music night at one of the local all-female colleges. Dousing myself in copious amounts of the then popular fragrance High Karate, I enthusiastically readied myself for an evening of jollification, whilst blasting out to my neighbours with my much-loved Meatloaf Bat Out of Hell album on constant replay. In approaching this impending change in lifestyle, and I guess, about to be a monk kind of is up there with change of lifestyle, I had by now given away almost all of my vinyl record collection, except Bad Out of Hell, to various college friends, which I now regret, as the records, not the friends, I should say, along with all sorts of other stuff like lava lamps and a top set of headphones. And so I was pretty much down to the bare bones in terms of personal possessions. The only thing left really was my precious 1979 Series 5000 Yamaha drum kit, which I always went on about and had decided to stash somewhere safe for the foreseeable future, along with a couple of pairs of drumsticks, just in case the monking thing didn't work out. I'm not sure that monking is actually a verb. Anyway, to monk? I don't think so.
Yes, it is.
Anyway, so on the night of this particular wrongdoing, Pedro and I arrived at the college party, whereupon I soon spotted a very attractive young lady with long dark hair and a cheeky glint in her eye. Our eyes met and we exchanged a few glances and smiles, and then I was straight over and we're on the dance floor boogieing on down to a few tunes before you could say, yes, you guessed it, Bat Out of Hell. My new dance partner, we're going to call her Ruth, leans forward and shouts in my ear, "What do you do?" And here it is, out of nowhere, just like a bat out of hell, and before my brain had engaged with my mouth, I say, "I'm a session drummer. I work on records and rock musical theatre. Yes, really." So Ruth, with a meltingly beautiful smile, looks at me straight in the eye and says, "Well, that's funny, because I'm a musician too." And at this point, I immediately have a flutter of panic, thinking, oh, this could be the worst start to a conversation with a beautiful woman I've ever had. By now, Pedro has started chatting to Ruth's mate, who we'll call Babs, and they were also having a boogie. Does anyone boogie anymore?
I still do.
Oh,
on my own, in the kitchen.
You can blame it on that. As the evening drew to a close and the music went into the slow number, the usual smooch ensued. I could see Pedro looking over at me for some indication of what we were going to do next. At the end of the dance, Ruth asked me if I'd like to go back to hers for a coffee. I accepted the offer and hung back to brief Pedro as we sneaked into the halls of residence and over to Ruth and Bab's room. The stakes were increasing. Well, coffee's arrived and we were sitting on the bed when Babs says something like, "So what have you been up to lately then?" And again, it's out before I know it, this wicked untruth forcing its way out from my mouth. I said, I just finished recording Kate Bush's new album, and next week I'm off to Manchester to do Joseph and his amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, me and my drums. Ruth and Babs in unison say, "Wow, that is amazing." And so, my memory of the rest of the night is extremely hazy beyond this point. Well, it was 34 years ago. But it's fair to say that there were no obvious signs that either Ruth or Babs having sussed me out for the scoundrel that I was being. After the beer had worn off the following morning, and having returned to my room in the very early hours, I did feel somewhat ashamed and guilty about my sojourn into complete fantasy land with two unsuspecting innocent young women. Through the banging hangover, I swore to myself that if I ever met Ruth again, I would fess up to having created a completely ridiculous story with not one grain of truth in it. However, second contact never happened, and a few weeks later my new contemplative life of self-denial in deepest, darkest Dorset began. We zoom forward 4 years. It's 1986, and I'm a friar living in a beautiful monastery perched on a hill in a small village on the Northumberland coast. With my fellow brethren, I lived a simple life of regular, silent prayer and contemplation. One of my fellow brothers, we'll call him Brother J, was working in the chaplaincy at Newcastle University. He had been approached by the Students' Drama Society to play a small walk-on part in a university production of Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. One day Brother J said, would I help him host a visit to the monastery and provide tea and cakes for some of the cast and the production team after the show had ended. I know everyone is ahead of me here. I was always happy to show people around and talk to them about the history of the place and our lifestyle, so I agreed. And when the day arrived, about 20 people appeared in the hallway. Standing in my brown habit with knotted rope around my waist, I introduced myself as Brother Chorley and began showing them round. We started in the chapel and I talked about our humble way of life and the vows of poverty, chastity and obedience that we promised to live by. As I finished my general spiel, a voice pipes up from the back. The voice says, "So where's Kate Bush and what happened to your drum kit then?" Yes, it's Babs. From all those years ago, standing before me. What on earth were the odds of that? Fortunately, Father Simon, she's smiling. Babs then proceeds to fill me in on what happened during the weeks that followed that fateful night. She said that Ruth couldn't stop talking about this drummer that she'd copped off with at the college party, and then I, that's Babs, met someone a couple of months after that night who went to agricultural college and proceeded to tell me that the drummer with the bright red hair was in fact a monk. Of course, I laughed and sneered at the stupidness of that suggestion, which I totally refused to believe, and sent the bloke off with a flea in his ear. What an absurd thing to say. Couldn't possibly have a grain of truth in it. Well, until now. Needless to say, I apologised profusely to Babs and expressed my guilty conscience most humbly over a pint or three of 40 shillings. But here I am, 34 years later, seeking forgiveness and absolution from you guys, Father Simon and the collective, for leading Ruth to believe a falsehood that I was able to make appear so much more plausible and genuine than the actual truth itself. To Ruth, wherever you are, I'm sorry that I led you on such a tale of deception. As Meatloaf would say, oh, baby, you're the only thing in this whole world that's pure and good and right, and wherever you are and wherever you go, there's always going to be some light. Paolo adds as a PS, I left the Franciscans a short while later, and I do play drums occasionally in a tribute rock covers band.
Oh,
how about that?
Like.
He's a rocking monk, that's what he is. It is tonight's confession. I don't think we've had one from a Franciscan before, even an ex-Franciscan, but I can see what he's getting at. Thank you, Paolo. What do you say to that, Sister Bobby from the Priory?
Well, Paolo, lying to get girls is never really a good idea, really, even though Matt is shaking
the
his
gates
head.
are going to close.
All I'm saying is you got your comeuppance. I was going to say, look, the universe will teach you a lesson until you learn it, but you got it. You got caught out by Babs, and to be quite honest, that's enough. But actually, you remain unforgiven by me. Unforgiven. Don't lie to get girls.
I like the... So where's Kate Bush then? And your drums. Just as well he stashed them away, isn't it?
Yes.
He now clearly needs them.
Well, I was slightly convinced. I mean, is there something that monks can't play the drums? I'm sure monks can play drums, can't they?
No, I think the whole thing was he had to give everything away.
You have to give everything away, including your drums
yes.
and your Bat Out of Hell album.
So actually, he deceived the monastery by saying, I've given everything away apart from my drums.
Apart from the drums and that LP. I think, really, he missed a trick, Paolo, here, because actually, if he'd told her the truth, which was, from tomorrow I am going to be a monk, I have but one night left, then, that might have worked a little bit better than the drum line. I think I'd have gone for that line. That would have been, and everyone would have thought, well, that's obviously nonsense, that's not what, but it would have been the truth. You'd have been able to use that line and it would have been the truth. So I'm not going to forgive, because you missed the opportunity to use the great line of, one more night before I retire to a life of poverty and chastity, my dear.
This one comes from Martin Fry.
That one? Really?
Well,
oh
no, obviously not.
Okay,
but anyway, he signed it Martin Fry, so he's clearly using it as a pseudonym. So we might as well go with it, unless it's actually from Martin Fry, which, from the context, I suspect not. Okay. Here we go. Father Simon and the assembled forgiving few. I have been fraught with guilt for over 30 years, but now wish to unburden my troubles and share my night of blurred vision and reveal to you my confession. Let me take you back to the mid to late 80s when ABC were totally cool.
Okay.
Oh.
And Paul Young was laying his hat somewhere.
Hello,
everywhere.
And he's in here. And if he's left his hat down in the green room, that's it.
I bet he loves that gag every time someone makes that to him, yeah.
Do you think?
Yeah.
I was attending a bi-monthly 8-man and women sales team meeting, says Martin Fry. This particular one also doubled up as our motivational end-of-year celebration. I was a young and confident 20-something making my way up my career ladder, at the time working for a very well-known manufacturer of tobacco products. Different times. The meeting was held in a hotel that had 20 or so bedrooms and could be found just outside a splendid medieval town somewhere in the north of England. It was always the highlight of the year, knowing that we'd finish early on the first day, and with an overnight stay planned as well, this meant we could relax and enjoy ourselves. This, of course, was on the proviso that we'd be up bright and early the next day at 9 o'clock for the big start for our business agenda to justify the cost of staying for the night. Well, as planned, the boss let us finish about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and with the bar not open for an hour or so, a few of us decided to have a dip in the hotel pool. Unfortunately, I hadn't planned for this, but was able to improvise by using my spare boxers that I normally use as pyjamas. Not a problem, I'll just put them on the radiator in my room and they'll be dry by bedtime. Or so I thought. We checked into our rooms, along with some librarians who were arriving for a conference, and then went to the plunging area. And like all corporate companies back in those days, we shared twin rooms. You'd like to know this, I'm sure. We doubled up with colleagues to halve the cost of the hotel budget. Not a problem, we were used to it, and I bunked with my teammate, who was called Andy. After some happy frolicking and splashing in the hotel pool, we supped a few jars, followed by a very lovely late dinner that carried on well into the early hours. Well, I assume that's what happened, as it was a long time ago and some of the details are somewhat blurry. I eventually went to bed and I discovered that my pyjamas were still soaking wet from the swimming escapade, and this meant I had to sleep au naturel. No problem, as my room buddy was fast asleep anyway, and he wouldn't know a thing. So I was soon sound asleep. It's about now that I have to share with you my very, very short-sightedness. Since childhood, actually. But since leaving school, off went the National Health Joe 90 glasses and in came contact lenses. Great for my newfound looks and confidence, but not so good now I'd taken them out for bed and had no specs with me. So here I was, waking up in a hotel room at some dark hour of the night in desperate need of the facilities. So up I got to go to the bathroom, and as I was sharing the room, I didn't want to switch on the light so as to disturb my sleep buddy. Why have you got your head in your hands, Matt?
Because we all know where this is going.
I stumbled into the darkness through the door to the bathroom,
Of course.
which closed with a worrying click behind me. This is the stuff of nightmares.
Yeah.
However, through my hazy, poor eyesight, to my disbelief, I found myself naked out in the corridor of the hotel.
Yep.
And not in the bathroom, locked out of my own room, and the door had automatically swung shut, as they do. I now found myself on the landing, slightly blurred-looking hotel corridor. Any amount of whispering and knocking will not be waking my colleague, or anyone nearby for that matter, sound sleepers or possibly overindulgence. You never know. So what do you do in these circumstances, locked out in the altogether, blurred vision and still needing the loo? I decided to go downstairs and find the night porter, or anyone on the reception desk to seek help, and above all, a key to my room. This is nightmare stuff. It really is worrying. So I get to the front desk to find no one around, but I did find my way to the reception toilets, and so I was relieved of one of my problems at least. However, no one had emerged at reception. So I decided to wait by the desk and decided to sit down on the chaise longue just opposite, where I unfortunately immediately fell asleep. We now move several hours later to around 7:45 a.m, where I find myself being abruptly woken up by one of my female co-workers who was on her way to breakfast. Once the shock had left her face, she very helpfully took me back upstairs, holding my hand. Poor eyesight comes in handy now and then, and got me back to my room. I managed then to get to breakfast for 08:30 hours, whereupon I found a large crowd cheering and clapping, including the librarians, and some guests who were staying at the hotel, all of whom had walked past me on their way to breakfast. They weren't part of our team meeting, but they'd clearly recognised me when I walked in. "Would you like a couple of boiled eggs and a sausage?" said one colleague, humorously. Many other such carry-on innuendos continued throughout the day. Suffice to say, I need forgiveness, I seek forgiveness, I plead forgiveness from you, Father Simon and the forgiving crew, not for my colleagues, because they made me pay for many years to come. I don't seek forgiveness from the hotel staff, who never did come to my rescue, but to all the other guests and the librarians who clearly had seen a sight for sore eyes and had been put off their full Monty breakfast. If you ever come to publish this sorry tale of misfortune and circumstance, I'm not sure which category this would fall under: nudity, hotel misdemeanours, sales team antics, overindulgence, pyjama blunders, short-sightedness, take your pick. It's maybe all of them. Yours, Martin Fry, but not that one. Anyway, we do get tales like that every now and again, but I like the fact that he actually went down to reception and then fell asleep on the chaise longue whilst in the altogether. Sister Bobby, what do you say?
Well, it's hilarious. I'm quite surprised, though, that there were no hospital staff
hotel staff. Yes.
Hotel staff between when he went down there, when he got locked out, obviously, and early morning. Surely there would have been a night porter, could have been male or female. There would have been some member of staff. They would have
clearly
been,
had no sympathy for him at
the chef would
all.
have come in, the washer up would have come in, the cleaning staff would have. Someone. What I think they did is really just go, leave him. Just leave it. So I love the fact that I think actually the hotel staff had the biggest gag on this and just left him to it.
Maybe
you're forgiven, because I think it probably did more for your team building than any other of the previous events.
Maybe
so.
what they thought, they just thought, look, that's Martin Fry.
No, not that one.
Didn't he? Haven't I seen him on Top of the Pops?
No.
You could barely recognise him.
Yeah.
Shoot that poison arrow and all that.
Exactly, very good.
Okay.
Brother Matthew.
Right, number one, who wears the boxers going swimming? No one, because that's not done at all. Let's not even think about doing that again. If you haven't got your boxers, don't go swimming. Or you haven't got your trunks, don't go swimming. Or go and buy some trunks. Here's the other thing, is I happen to know a night porter, and he says this happens all the time. People lock themselves out of their hotel room, and for some reason the people who do this tend to be naked Who'd have thought? But this happens like it would blow your mind how many times guests lock themselves out of their hotel room and have to come down to reception, trying to find a vase on the way to keep themselves decent, and ask for a key to their room. Happens all the time. So I am going to say forgiven, because I agree with Bobby. Somebody on the hotel staff should have said, again, we've got someone naked on the chaise longue. Maybe we don't have the chaise longue, by the way.
Or just cover him with a blanket or something.
Or do something. Come on.
He'd been there for hours.
And he's Martin Fry.
For
not
heavens.
That one. So I'm going to forgive.
All right. Correspondence from Mr. Rock Forceful, who says, I've got a sulking son upstairs because I've told him he's not old enough to listen to tonight's confession. Well, I'm only giving it a PG... anyone can listen to it. I think it's all perfectly fine. It's a little... If you're preparing food, and it is a Foodie Thursday, or if you're serving food, it's just a little thing. I'm just saying, it won't be to everybody's taste. All right, Nudge.
Yeah, good. Looking forward to this.
Okay.
You've teed it up nicely.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, I've done my best. Let's just see which 80s pop star has sent in tonight's confession. Tom, who's a jazz musician, he says. Anyway, thank you, Tom. Dear Father Simon and the forgiving few, this is a true story. It happened to me in the summer of 2004 when I was 37. I don't know why that's relevant. Anyway, I settled down in the seat on the tube in London near a sleeping man. The train rattled up to speed. I looked over. 2 young guys sat across the aisle with another one a couple of spaces to my left. They were in a group, early 20s, had crisp jeans, nice phones, and rows of white teeth. I was alone and pulled my kebab out of its carrier bag. I felt in contrast... What? Yeah, it's a kebab.
So smelly food on the tube.
He's going to get there. I felt in contrast to the 3 young men, fat, sweaty and dirty. I'd been running around London all day. This curious mix of feeling older but somehow junior arrived, and I realised I would become more common as I got to middle age. It took a while to unwrap the kebab, Father Simon. As I did so, I remembered the poster which asked people not to eat smelly food on the train. Just like what Matt just said. Who cares, I thought. Who cares? I'm going to eat. The carriage was filling up. The 3 young guys were watching me unwrap my kebab as they bantered, but it was an awareness I ignored in the way you do in a city. I'm 37, a father, a husband and a man. I've been around the block. I can eat my kebab. No one and nothing can stop me. I'm not hurting anyone. I opened the wrapper, and squatting on the top of the kebab was a big, pale green, pickled chilli. Maybe partly to impress the onlookers, I took a confident bite. O-M-G. Great Scott, whoops-a-daisy, good heavens above, and various other exclamations, which he didn't put down, but somehow it's gone through the translation process. Neat chili-soaked vinegar exploded into my mouth and seemed to get instantly right up into my nose, like really hot mustard does, and actually, literally, into my brain.
Actually?
It was like it went absolutely everywhere inside my skull. I remembered being paralysed by a chili once in the 90s. It was too early to say quite how bad this chili was going to be because of the delayed onset thing, but I instantly knew it was going to be really bad. I desperately shovelled in some meat and coleslaw to try and control the incipient burning and maintain some appearance of normality. Then my brain kind of locked down into this inexorable pepper crescendo. I'm gonna sneeze. My eyes were tight shut, so I fumbled for the handful of serviettes in the bag. Time kind of slowed down. The sneeze was building up to blow, and I brought the wad of tissues up to my face. The build-up went on and on and on forever. It was like bursting a bike in a tube with a car tyre air compressor. A bit more, a bit more, a bit more, a bit more. It's gonna go, it's gonna go, it's gonna go, it's gonna go, kaboom!
It went.
It was a monster of a sneeze. At least a 9 on whatever the sneeze equivalent of the Richter scale is. If I could have spoken, I would have bellowed, "Run for your lives!" It would need special effects and slow-mo to do it in a movie. And that technique where things suddenly freeze and you get to look at the explosion frozen in time from all different angles, like in The Matrix. By the way, you should know I have an unusually big rib cage, so I have significant powers in the explosive exhalation department. For example, probably my greatest gift is shooting a wine cork from my mouth across a room at someone's head. Powerful and accurate. This time, my automatic nervous system had taken over entirely and thrown every last sinew into it, so it was even more than I could ever do deliberately. My mum used to let out a very loud, very high and very long chew when she sneezed, which my brother and sister all grew up thinking was normal. But I didn't do that anymore since my brother got kicked out of maths because the teacher assumed that no one would make such a bizarre sound while sneezing unless they were taking the mickey, which he wasn't. Anyway, all these thoughts were swirling around my head as I was in a daze with my eyes closed as I kind of came to my senses gradually. This was understandable because it was like someone had just popped a hand grenade in my mouth, lifted my jaw shut and waited for the bang. So it was still in the middle of major chilly aftershock, but as my head returned vaguely to normal, it dawned on me the sense of what had happened wasn't limited to the inside of my skull. The first clue was that when I opened my eyes, my glasses seemed to have frosted on the outside by a mist of droplets of various sizes. Second, there was total silence in the carriage. Except for a sound. I realised after a few seconds the sound was hysterical giggling. It was the sound of two of the young guys, totally, helplessly giggling. One of them struggled to squeeze out the phrase, "That was so disgusting." Third, the young guy sitting most directly opposite me was looking in absolute horror at his freshly laundered and ironed white shirt and kind of patting it with splayed fingers and then looking at his hands. At first I thought I must have missed something done by someone else when I was distracted by sneezing, and then with dawning horror I came to the realization that they must be reacting to my actual sneeze. My sneeze had actually sprayed the whole carriage with heaven knows what. What should I do? Should I say something? Should I apologise? Should I try and wipe his shirt? What should I do? Maybe it wasn't me. Okay, of course it was. I decided. I asked my instincts, and the answer came back: act as though nothing has happened. Tough it out. Don't apologise. Wait and watch and act natural. They were all staring at me and alternating between laughing and expressing whispered disgust. I decided to wipe my glasses to give me a better view of the blast zone. This seemed to provoke an increase in giggling. By now I was irrevocably committed to my strategy of bluffing it out, and there was no turning back. I decided to resume eating my kebab, minus the green chilli, which triggered more sniggers, especially when I accidentally dribbled chilli sauce down my T-shirt. Finally, as they jumped off at the next stop, I noticed one of them taking my picture with a phone. Oh, great. I was going to be immortalised as the disgusting guy off the tube in some guy's phone. But I didn't care, because I think actually it was quite funny, because it did actually happen, and I was very, very disgusting. But I do please ask forgiveness, especially from the poor guy that I sneezed on, because his shirt was very white and his jeans were very creased. And this is from Tom, the jazz musician. Thank you, Tom. We kept it for Nigel because he can comment on the ingredients for the chili and also the kebab. But when you get that chili freeze, that chili explosion, it's kind of a tough one. Sister Bobby's looking stern.
Yeah, this is going to be short and sweet for me. The rules on the tube are: do not take smelly food, and do not eat smelly food, and do not sneeze smelly food over everybody else, because it's really not very nice. So, quite genuinely, I know it's difficult when you're starving and hungry and you've got hot Cornish pasty in your pocket and you really want to eat it right now, but you can't. You have to wait. So you are not forgiven for splaying everybody.
I guess this is probably the way it's going to go. Let's check in with the novice.
I have to say, one of the worst things about getting the last train home, in my case is 1:30, is when you get on it, you think the whole carriage has been sponsored by a burger company, and that aroma just, and you think, oh my, that's enough to put you off it for life. And everyone's tucking in and dribbling it and wearing it, what have you. Obviously with the chili. What I think, I really do feel for Tom Majazza.
Have you had chili paralysis?
Yeah, it's like wasabi as well. Sometimes it's like having your head injected with something when it goes straight between your eyes, doesn't it? If you have too much, it's a similar effect. But I just think, Tom, there's a lot of self-loathing going on there, and you don't warrant that, fella. You just had a kebab, not even necessarily late night, and you had a chili that went off a Scoville scale. So the fact that the others were taking pictures of you and what have you, I just thought, well, that's pretty churlish of them. So no, I'm not. You don't need forgiveness. You're forgiven by me, but the people who took all the pictures and went, oh my goodness, that's disgusting. Well, I think they should look at themselves a little bit more, and they might see all the red staining and the green
just
staining.
looking at your shirt, it does look as though someone might have sneezed on that. To be perfectly honest,
it is quite lively. I have to say tonight.
Brother Matthew, what are you saying there?
Yeah, someone sneezes chili on me on the tube. Taking a picture of them is the least of their problems. I'm going to say this, Tom. I bet Tom is a kind of he talks about his unusually large rib cage. Oh, here comes Tom. He's going to do his thing with the champagne cork again. And the rules don't apply to Tom. No, I'm a 37-year-old dad, therefore I can eat a kebab on the tube. No, you can't, Tom. Turns out society's conventions do apply to you, sunshine, and your sneezing kebab. So, no, as you might have guessed, not forgiven with your rib cage.
And your jazz music.
Yeah. I hate it when Matt sits on the fence like that.
I know, a little bit disgusting. Probably should have warned you. Anyway, that's fine. They were this week's confessions. Did you forgive anybody? Probably not. Anyway, maybe it's provoked a deep and dark secret in your soul. Maybe you need to tell me. confessions@bbc.co.uk. More in a week. And don't forget, you can listen to all our shows from the last 30 days on the iPlayer. Here come some selected highlights. Monday's Ready to Book Club. And we spoke to Jem Lester about his book Stumm, which is very good. You can still see that online. Chris Rea was in on Tuesday talking about his new project. Lots of cars, lots of music in there. Wednesday was Paul Young talking about his brand new album. And Thursday, Nige served up porchetta, delete as applicable, with a salsa verde sauce. Anyway, all the details can be found on the Ready 2 website. Just head for Thursday's episode page and toggle. I know, it's detailed and complicated. You toggle down until you hit the recipe. It is there. Believe me. Thank you so much.